moral foundations of our culture, we also support the church. We want to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. Thank you for standing with us.
Welcome to today's issues. Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. It is Monday, February 12th. Tim always likes to give the date. I like to as well because I can lose track. I am joined in studio by Wesley Wildman. Good morning, Wesley.
Good morning. Glad to be on and looking forward to what we're going to cover on today's issues today, hoping that we can help educate? Or no, that's Friday.
Educate,
sorry. Is that Friday? Sorry.
We educate all week
We still
long.
okay. Still educate.
Yeah. All right, and then Fred Jackson is joining us.
Yes, try to help out the team here.
Yes. We need all the help
that's
we can
right.
get.
I was thinking we need the help
We
we
need
can
all the help we can get. In fact, you were just telling us, I hope I can share this.
Sure, go.
You're on kid duty today.
That's right.
And nothing tests the mental strength of a man than being in charge of the kids.
That's right, all day. Yeah, it's balancing between my wife, Chelsea. She's out of town on a work trip, and therefore I'm stuck being mom and dad for 48 hours. So far, so good. No hospital visits. No, I can't think of anything that's gone necessarily wrong. I think there was only one area in which we skipped yesterday, which was naps. That was on the list to do. We just skipped them. I wanted to trial and error to see if they went to sleep quicker.
Yeah.
And it worked. They went to sleep quicker.
Oh, at night?
Yeah, at night. Yeah. So we skipped
I
the
see.
nap time so that they go to sleep. It worked, okay?
And earlier it worked.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just ask you one other thing. Now, people don't know this about you unless they're close enough to you to
Sure.
know. But Chelsea does not like pizza.
That's right.
You do.
I do.
So in terms of what the family eats, you rarely get to have pizza.
That's right.
So you were in charge. Did you order any pizza
Tonight.
it's
happening. Yes, sir.
Fist bump. It's happening.
Yesterday, she had already had a few things set out to eat and to warm up and cook and all that. So we went with the plan that she gave us. And for dinner tonight, there's nothing on the schedule. So it's going to be, now there is. It's going to be pizza.
All right, man.
Appreciate
man
it.
after my own heart.
Appreciate you checking on me.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Fred. What was it that something happened last night? I can't remember. What was it? Something seemed like there was something big last night.
Yeah,
What was
speaking of pizza, was probably the busiest pizza night of the year.
that? Yeah.
Sure.
Super Bowl. And a full confession, I've sat in for Jenna Ellis this morning. Full confession, I did talk about the game, but I did not see the start of the game, and I went to bed because I didn't see the end of the game either.
Well, you get up at 3 or something.
Yes, so I needed to get a few hours of sleep.
Yeah.
But I did see the betwixt.
Yes.
That's
what was
right.
in the
Hey, you're
set-
Canadian, so
Yes.
we cut you some slack.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and it was a really good game.
I watched the whole thing only because I knew we would at least mention it today.
Sure.
Yes.
So, Wes, I didn't want to be a hypocrite here,
Mhm.
but it was a really, really good Super Bowl.
Well, and I mentioned to the folks on Jenna's show this morning, any sport, whether it's hockey or football, that goes into overtime is a credit to both teams.
Yes.
Yeah.
In other
that's
words,
right.
they're evenly matched.
That's right.
And it was. I mean, it was a battle of the quarterbacks as usual, and two terrific quarterbacks.
And two good defenses, because we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs beat the San Francisco 49ers 25-22. I was rooting for the Chiefs simply because as a Rams fan, lifelong Rams fan, I never root for the 49ers. But we know we have folks here at work.
Yes.
I know
was
Jody
one.
Brown, who
Yeah.
works
Mhm.
with American Family News. He came last week all decked out in his 49ers jersey.
Yes.
I
I was pulling for the 49ers as well. So
Yeah.
and of course, it was a 3-point game. There's a 3-point difference in the game, so it was 25-22. Chiefs won, and it went into overtime, as
Yeah.
Fred mentioned a while ago. And as far as what I expected out of the game, it was exactly what I thought when it comes to the performance on defense, the back and forth. There was never a point at which, even though there was a 10-point lead by the 49ers at one point, everyone knew that it was going to come down to a very close game.
Yeah.
And it did, and of course it went into overtime to get the win. But I enjoyed watching it. There was if it's okay if I mention this about the Super Bowl ad. I know a lot of people that are listening saw the ad that depicted a confusing version of the gospel. What was the name of the ad?
Oh, He Gets You.
It Gets You.
It's a series, yeah.
We won't get into that at this very moment, but I want to let our audience know that we are working on a response to that, and we'll send that out in an email form and then possibly even cover it throughout the week if we get an opportunity on today's issues.
So for folks who did not watch the Super Bowl either this year or last year, because they ran one last year as well, but this is I think billions of dollars behind this He Gets Us ad campaign. They have ads on billboards around the country.
Right.
They run ads online if you're streaming, or these ads will pop up if you're just online doing a Google search or whatever. This is a series of ads. I'm just going to say, this is my opinion. These ads come from a leftist, progressive, quote unquote. Tim always likes to do air quotes around progressive because it's not really progressive. Abe Hamilton calls them regressives. Evangelical perspective. So these ads say He Gets Us. And the ad last night, which if I recall, was 60 seconds long.
That'd be about $14 million.
It was $14 million. Yeah. And someone sent around, maybe it was you, that sent around a meme that someone sent out. It showed Jesus feeding the 4,000 and said, well, sorry, I can't feed all of you. I spent $14 million on a Super Bowl ad. These ads do not present the gospel, all right? They are – now, a lot of Christians like these ads, but it's because they're viewing it from a Christian perspective.
Sure.
Okay? And what this ad last night did is it had all sorts of individuals who are generally would be seen as on the fringes or despised, and someone washing their feet.
Right.
Okay? Now, of course, Jesus washed the feet of his disciples as a way to show how he was washing them of their sins, and he is serving them, and they are in turn to serve Christ's church.
That's right.
Okay? There is another example of someone washing the feet of Jesus in the Gospels, and that was a woman who had been forgiven of her sins, washing the feet of Jesus with her hair. Okay? What we're saying is all of these ads, which are not always about foot washing, but all of these ads that say He Gets Us are intended, I'm assuming, to communicate to people that God knows what they're going through.
Yes, and
I'm fine with that.
It stops there, though.
But it stops there.
Yeah.
What does it say?
So it stops there, and it does not provide or encourage or share any testimonies of the people that are on the fringes that would have been despised of having a conversion or a life change. Obviously, as it results to someone getting saved, there's a variety of different. Some people get saved and they stop stuff immediately.
Right.
Others need counseling over time. But the idea of a Christian getting saved always results in a life change.
Right.
And in this case, they don't provide that. They leave them in their sin the way they are, and they don't provide that in the actual commercial that's there. So knowing that and having people already, there's a lot of really strong, solid biblical teachers and commentaries that are what do you call a commentary? Yes.
Yeah.
Commentary. They are
Commentator.
They are already responding to this on social media, and obviously in favor of what we're saying now, us in favor with them, and so we are working on a response to this as well that we will be sending out in an email form.
Right.
The group that sponsors obviously has a lot of money. $14 million for a 1-minute commercial.
This we have Jameson Taylor, who's heads up as vice president of AFA Action.
Right.
We've turned him loose. He's really good at sniffing out information and find. We're trying to find out who exactly is behind this group. Now, if you go to their website, there is not a clear presentation of the gospel there either. Okay, so, but my understanding is there are hundreds of millions of dollars behind this campaign. When it started maybe 2-3 years ago, I heard the number of $1 billion thrown around.
Wow.
So we're trying to find out. There are all kinds of people saying it's this person, this family, this group. We're trying to get to the bottom of that before we start throwing names around. But
and one more thing on this from my perspective is that either last year or the year before, there was a pretty good push from people that what we would consider in our camp that would say, well, they're getting people to the website to share the gospel. Okay.
Right.
Well, first of all, we can disagree with methodologies. I disagree with that, anyways,
right.
Because it was because you're deceiving people to get to, anyways. But when you go to the website, it doesn't share the gospel.
Right.
So that's out the window. So I would say that we're getting further and further down the road on this whoever's behind these ads.
Yes.
They're becoming more and more exposed, and it's becoming more and more obvious to almost every Christian,
right,
Bible-believing Christian, that this is not a complete picture. It's incomplete.
Well, and part of the problem with this, like, I agree with you and disagree with the methodology, but part of the problem is if you put an ad there and the conclusion is, and it says, Jesus did not teach hate.
Yeah.
He gets us, okay? All right, so how do you define hate? Are you talking, because there was an illegal immigrant getting off a bus, somebody washing her feet, okay? There was a homosexual on the beach and a priest washing his feet. There were several different things there. And so my question is, if your methodology is to tell people Jesus gets you and to get them to the website, what if they don't go to the website?
Right.
Then what message do they leave with? They leave with the message that tells them Jesus gets you. He understands you. He accepts you as you are.
But you don't.
But the gospel says he loves you so much, he's not going to leave you that way.
That's right. Yep.
And that message is completely absent from this series of ads, which goes back a year or two. So anyway, we are working on a response. I think Abraham Hamilton III is going to be talking about it. Anyway, lots of people already are discussing it. And let me just, one final thing on this. When we talked about, I've seen Christians saying, I had tears in my eyes when I saw that. Listen, I get that.
Oh, yeah.
But you're looking at the ad from the perspective of someone who already follows Jesus. You are looking at this ad as someone who has an understanding heart, has received compassion, and that touches you. But you know what? That's because you have a converted heart. Mm-hmm. For the people whose hearts are not converted, no one's pointing them to the way of salvation.
That's right.
And that's the problem we have with it.
Yep.
All right.
100%.
So anyway, that was it's good. I'm glad we talked about that. There are a lot of folks.
That's what I knew that a lot of people that in our listening audience saw that or are seeing responses to that, and I wanted people to know we're working on something too.
Yeah. All right. Let's we'll turn from the Super Bowl, and he gets us to other news that's going on, Fred.
Yeah, other news. I think most people in our audience have heard of Joel Osteen and his church there in the Houston, Texas area. Lakewood Church has 45,000 people in the various services every Sunday. Well, yesterday, in the midst of between some of those services, I think it was early afternoon, it was a particular, I think, an Hispanic service was about to begin. A woman entered that church. She apparently had a long coat on, but underneath that, she had a gun. And she was proceeding to open fire on people. Fortunately, like many churches today, they have a security team there, and we can talk about that, the need for security at churches today.
Right.
But yesterday afternoon, Pastor Joel Osteen was part of a news conference to talk about what happened at that church. Cut number 1.
You said it, Chief, it could have been a lot worse. Of course, we're devastated. I mean, we've been here 65 years and have somebody shooting in your church. But, we don't understand why all these things happen, but we know God's in control. And we're going to pray for that little 5-year-old boy and pray for the lady that was deceased, her family and all, and the other gentleman. But no, it's just kind of in a fog, but just believe that, we're going to stay strong. We're going to continue to move forward. And there are forces of evil, but the forces that are for us, the forces of God are stronger than that. So we're going to keep going strong and just, doing what God's called us to do, lift people up and give hope to the world. Again, I want to thank all these gentlemen because, I can only imagine if it would have happened during the 11 o'clock service. We were in between services going into the Spanish service. So, if there's anything good of it, you know what, she didn't get in there and do a whole lot worse damage. So we thank God for that He's watching over all of us. And as the chief says, we're going to keep going strong and bringing hope to the world. But thank you again, gentlemen.
So yes, the shooter was deceased. The team was the security team was able to bring her down fairly quickly before she could do much damage. But they're still searching for a motive. They simply do not know why at this point. What motivated her to take a gun and then to open fire?
And she brought a child with her.
She brought a child with her. So this is,
that child is in critical condition.
Yeah, the speculation begins.
That's right.
That she had believed there was somebody at that service who she believed had done her wrong. But that's just speculation at this point. There's so much that's unknown. But also, this story.
She a member or a consistent attendee, or do we know that?
We don't know that.
I couldn't hardly find much information on her.
Right.
No, but it just points to the importance. We talked about this at our story meeting in the newsroom this morning. It's part of the age in which we live. I know our church here in Tupelo has security people. We did a little survey around the table. Almost every church represented in our newsroom.
Our church does. The church that Wesley and I go to
has a security team. It's just part of the reality.
We have security here.
Yep.
This ministry has well-trained security because the world has changed. The world has changed even from 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Taking us back just a little bit, when I first started, some of my first memories of coming up to AFA, my dad and I, we'd come up here at night, and I'm thinking I was probably 8 or 10 years old, somewhere in there. Remember coming up here and just Dad walking out through the door after hours.
Yeah.
Because it was unlocked, because you didn't have to, we weren't concerned about that. Now, I remember around, 12, 13, 14, I remember coming up here after hours and you having to unlock the door, but during work hours it was open. So, but that just shows you how far things have changed in 20 years that you have to think about these things.
Well,
prepare
for years and years. I've been here 28 years. We would all, when we came here to work, we would all have devotion to start the day, and all the doors were unlocked.
That's it. Yep.
And the reason we started locking the doors is because one morning while we were in devotions, somebody came in and rifled through some of the ladies' purses and stole some things, and we thought, well, now we got to change that.
And then the shooting at FRC's headquarters in Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago forced us to go, wait a minute, we went beyond just locking doors. Now we're having to badge in.
Yes.
We provided a security team. We began building out a security team for here. So you're right, things have changed a lot in the last 15 or 20 years, but I am very thankful for those officers who were off-duty officers who were serving as a security team for them. And if I could add anything else to this, is the importance of having a security team at your church.
Yeah.
It's a simple thing to do. Doesn't require just a whole lot of time, obviously during the service hours. I understand in most cases it's a volunteer effort, but please do it if you can.
And I know here and at our church, and probably the same thing is true for yours, Fred, all the people who are on the security team have enhanced carry permits, which means they've gone through extensive training. Ours train regularly on situations. Our staff is prepped, not just for these kinds of events, but for tornadoes and major storms, that kind of thing. So, folks, the world has changed. It's sad to see these kinds of things. And as soon as we find out, Fred, more information about the motivations, as far as I can remember, I can't remember a woman being a shooter.
I think you're right.
I think
Except
it always
the
seems to be,
Nashville,
but that
school
was
shooting.
Was that a woman or was that a trans?
I forget. I didn't even mean to.
No, I'm just trying.
I think you're right. I think it was a boy that was wanting to be a girl. I don't know.
Anyway.
That does get confused. Hey, and I thought the pastor there,
Joel Osteen.
I thought he handled the interview very well.
Yes.
I was happy to see the way he handled that.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is back in hospital. You know, a big story there around the end of December, early January. The world found out he was in hospital, and it turns out a lot of people at the Pentagon didn't know he was
Or
at
the White
hospital.
House.
Or the White House.
Right.
But this time, he was taken by ambulance yesterday to the hospital. All that we know is, and I'm quoting here, an emergent bladder issue. That's all we know. He's in intensive care. But he did things right. When he went into the hospital, he had retained his functions and duties of the office, but about 5 o'clock last evening, he turned things over to his Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, and obviously the White House knows about this now. This morning on Fox and Friends, they talked with Dr. Nicole Saphier on what's going on with Austin having to be readmitted to hospital. Obviously something serious going on here. Cut number 9.
We're 7 weeks after his surgery. And one of the most common things that we do see in post-prostatectomy patients, in about 30 to 50% of times, you can have incontinence. Usually you're not admitted for something like an incontinence. So my thoughts are maybe he has an infection as another complication. Maybe he needs to be inpatient to receive some IV antibiotics. I'm certain that they're going to probably be doing a CT scan. It does seem that he, as I said, is having a very complicated course.
Yeah, he is he's getting on in years. He was diagnosed first with prostate cancer, which is fairly common in men, 40, 45 and over. But as Dr. Saphier has said, perhaps some complications have evolved. But I found it interesting to call an ambulance to take him to the hospital, and his entourage obviously was with him. But be praying for the Defense Secretary Austin, and we hope it's nothing too serious, and that he can recover. Although some people are saying, we're working on some reaction stories, that with this problem, perhaps it may be time for him to step aside and allow someone else, because I think there's a lot of concern, and we'll be talking about this a bit later. There's a concern from the president on down about health conditions of our leaders right now. And we're in a time, once again, certainly in this country and around the world, where we need people who mentally and physically are in very good shape to deal with what we're dealing with in this world right now.
If you combine his age at 70 with this health issue that he's got going on, I think that would be a wise move. Obviously, I hate to hear anybody going through these types of health issues, especially when you're trying to work and provide for your family. I will say, though, that with some of his health issues going on, who knows what the direct cause. Well, the doctors will find out the direct cause. But when you have as much chemo treatment as he's had, that could be some side effects from there. But obviously, like you said, our prayers are with Lloyd Austin and his family, because that's in the news right now. And especially, at least kind of tongue-in-cheek here, at least he let people know.
Yes,
this time around. I think hopefully he learned from his first time around. So, good.
Well, and I will say this. Over the weekend, I watched the first hour of Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin of Russia, and I don't want to open up that whole can of worms in the discussion. But one thing I did notice is that Putin spoke. It was over 2 hours, the interview, and he was fit. His mind was clear. He looked strong. I'm not saying I'm a Putin fan. The guy seems to be running
saying
a regime.
Appearance matter.
Yeah, like you're saying,
you
need, or Fred, you need people who can do the job that they're assigned to do, and of course, a great deal of concern in this country over Joe Biden. All right, folks, we're going to take a break here. I do want to say hi to Rusty and Beth Vanderver from Michigan. They are visiting and are listening. And after the break, Joseph Seidel will be talking about how God brought him through a time after a tornado wiped out his town. We'll be back with more.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
One day in London, a Methodist preacher looked out over the poor people of that city. His heart went out to those people. He wanted to help them, and he dedicated his life to their service. Little did he know what that dedication would mean. In a few years, his efforts to aid the poor had gained a few followers and many opponents. Quite often he found his followers beaten and their property wrecked or destroyed because of their convictions. In 1884, 37 years after he began preaching, 600 of his followers were sent to prison because of their religious concern for the poor. Following several years of persecution, the founder and the movement began to win some acceptance. Much of this acceptance was brought about when he presented his case in a book entitled In Darkest England and the Way Out. In that book, he had concrete proposals for several improvements: relieving poverty and fighting vice, homes for the homeless, training centers to prepare immigrants for overseas countries, rescue homes for women and girls being sold into bondage for immoral purposes, homes for released prisoners, legal aid for the poor, and practical help for the alcoholic. The movement became known as the Salvation Army, and the preacher who fell in love with the poor people of London was named William Booth. Someone asked him one day what the secret of his very productive life was. His answer was simple and quite profound. "I'll tell you the secret," he said. "I have made up my mind that Jesus Christ could have all there was of William Booth. I know that he has men with more brains and more ability. But when I saw the poor of London, and knowing what Jesus Christ could do for them, I made up my mind to give all there is of me to him." Of this man, the historian wrote that his theology was simple, certainly concentrated on essential matters, clearly expounded for the understanding and inspiration of the common man. Read the history books, and one thing stands out above everything else. It isn't the person with the most ability who does the most good in life. It is rather the person with the most dedication and determination. And herein is the beauty of the Christian faith. For the carpenter doesn't judge us by how much ability we have, but by the depth of our dedication. It isn't the wisest person, or the richest person, or the strongest person that the Galilean is looking for. No, it is the dedicated and faithful person. Our Maker doesn't judge us by how high we rise in life, but by how hard we try. We aren't judged by the amount of our abilities, but by the way we use what abilities we have. William Booth made up his mind to give all he had, and that's all our Maker wants. I guess what this story really says to us is that when we present ourselves to him for service, we should leave our credentials and recommendations at home. We need to bring only our faithfulness.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
Isaiah 40:31 says, "But they who wait for the Lord will renew their strength. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." What really is waiting on the Lord? Waiting can be acknowledging God in every moment. Waiting can also be following the peace of the Holy Spirit, even peace in the chaos. Now, don't let waiting on God be an excuse for timidity or laziness. We already have some instructions, so we should not wait for a thunderous voice for what is already clearly told to us. Maybe you were called to be a missionary, or maybe you're just supposed to pray, read the Bible, and love more. Waiting on the Lord is being patient when God says to wait, and it's being obedient when God says, or has already said, to go. But where God hasn't spoken, continue to wait and pray, and He will renew your strength.
This has been an encouraging word from American Family Radio.
Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Matthew 19:14.
American Family Radio. This is Today's Issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of Today's Issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of Today's Issues.
And welcome back. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. The captain should be back in the chair tomorrow. So I always like to think, guys, I'm sitting here, folks, if you're listening, with Wesley Wildman and Fred Jackson. I always think of this as being like the USS Enterprise on Star Trek. We're here. I have the comm today, but tomorrow Captain Kirk will be back.
And he will engage.
Yes, he will engage. So I guess that means I'm Spock. I don't.
Let's have a look at those ears.
Yes.
So if it's not back in the saddle for this analogy, what would it be? Back behind the ship? Is there a good one for this one?
Back. They just always said you have the comms.
Comms. There you go.
Yeah.
Back behind the comms.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know. You're asking me. I'd have to go all the way back to the 60s for that one.
I won't make you do that on live radio.
I'm glad to go back to last week. All right, we want to welcome, by the way, you're listening to Today's Issues, and we have in studio with us Joseph Seidel. He and his wife, Vicky, and their son, Caleb, are here. Tim, in fact, invited them to come on down because of an email, a note that Joseph had sent to the ministry, talking about how God had been working in his life. And, of course, it was through American Family Radio, but, of course, we know we're just, as all Christians are, the hands and feet of Jesus. And so we wanted to invite Joseph down to talk about his story of going through an EF4 tornado that struck his town. And so, Joseph, welcome to Today's Issues.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background, and then lead into the story about how this tornado kind of changed not only your life, but the lives of a lot of people in your town.
Sure. So on December 10th of 2021, EF4 tornado, of course, came through about 160 approximate miles western Kentucky. My hometown is Mayfield, Kentucky. At that time, our emergency manager, I was also a volunteer firefighter. I was a lieutenant of internal affairs at the jail. We were put on standby for this tornado that was originally supposed to come our direction, and it shifted up towards Mayfield.
Okay.
At that time, that iconic photo, what I was saying earlier on the break, of the courthouse with the tower missing off of it, it actually fell on top to the jail. And when we responded, we had to evacuate about 92 people and get them somewhere within 2 hours.
And that's in the middle of a huge storm.
Correct. That was right in the center of it. So getting there was a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
About after the evacuation of the jail, we decided to go ahead and help the community, go door to door, see what we could. Half of our team broke up, went to the candle factory where we had some our coworker and some work release inmates. Shortly after that, when we were in a home, I got a phone call, said that one of our deputies was no longer with us.
Yeah.
He was a great man, Robert Daniel. He had managed to protect and keep alive 6 human beings, so yeah. I honor him. However, after that, AFR, it really helped me out. I was a leader. I needed to show confidence. I didn't need to show any weakness, and I would listen to your radio station, and a lot of individuals here kept my spirit happy. I would take an hour in my office and I would listen to Today's Issues, and I would thank everybody. And, it's nice to have good conservative Christian views, and that's hard to come by. And in a job like that, they kind of restrict your belief. Unfortunately, that's the way this country is going.
Right.
So I sat there and I thought about it, and I decided to go ahead and follow God. And shortly after that, I had my son Caleb. I focused more on my family. And I just want, your sponsors and your listeners to know that the donations and contributions that they give to American Family Radio not only helps people physically, but spiritually. So any little seed that somebody puts out there, they don't understand the value of that and the way it can change somebody's life.
Now, let me ask you a question. Did I understand that you got saved this, or did this reinforce your faith?
It reinforced my faith.
That's what I thought.
It did. I was more open about it. Like I said, they kind of want to suppress you in companies and businesses right now, and I wasn't going to have it. I realized I need to go out and plant those seeds in my community and rebuild.
Amen. Do you remember if it was any one particular sermon or radio program, or was it just wall to wall having Christian, wall to wall, or morning to afternoon having Christian content in front of you?
I can exactly tell you what it was. Is the podcasts on the phone. It was the comfort that I had knowing that I could turn it on at any time.
Amen. Yeah.
And just close my eyes and take myself out of that situation.
Amen. Yeah. Well, hey, since you mentioned that, what he's talking about is on AFR.net. All of the podcasts are archived there so that you can listen to it at your convenience.
Right.
As opposed to what you're listening right now, which is live radio, where you take the programs and archive them. In fact, we've gone a step further in the last 18 months. We begin to add programs on our podcast that we don't have room for on live radio. And so we've got a handful of extra.
Like Sandy Rios.
Sandy Rios
is one. Has a podcast.
That's right. And so, do you have something?
Well, yeah, Fred's got a question, but I also want to make mention of the fact that we do have an app, an AFR app, that you can download for your phone or other portable device, and you can access the same content. Some people don't have access to a terrestrial radio station or the internet. If they're driving, you can still listen to AFR on the app.
Joseph, your story just reminds us of the power of radio. I've been in radio now for over 4 decades, and I love the intimacy of radio. We're able to come into your office. We're able to come into your home.
That's a good point.
We're able to come into your car. And the story after story after story that we have heard through the years, that just at a particular moment when a person needed something, and very often it's the gospel message, that AFR is there.
Absolutely.
And so folks that are listening right now, we're coming up on our share-a-thon just in a few weeks in the middle of April, understand that you may never hear the stories.
Right.
Of what your contribution to American Family Radio is doing that has eternal values.
Absolutely.
There are values for the moment that, as you've been discussing, just at that moment, you needed the messages of American Family Radio. But, folks, never underestimate how God can use your $10 gift, $50 gift, $100, whatever it is, for an eternal value in things. And your story is just another one of those stories of how God is using American Family Radio. And I just think that's what we want to hear, because that encourages us.
Right.
When we hear these stories, because we sit behind these microphones every day, we don't see people like yourself. And it's so good to have you in studio with us to tell us your story. So talk about that a little bit, about that power of radio, what it means to you.
Absolutely. Like you said, anywhere you go, it can feel like you're right there with somebody. And I believe putting a positive message out to, especially, you guys do not do this for recognition. I understand that. However, a thank you and a compliment goes a long way. And I'm one of many stories. I guarantee you that. And you guys are saving lives. Like I said before, you are first responders. You are here saving a life every day if you guys don't even realize it.
Well, thank you for that. Joseph, take 60 seconds and just encourage our listeners. You talked about being more bold and more open. Mm-hmm. That is so needed from the church in this day and age, when a lot of people are self-censoring. Mm-hmm. They don't want to get into, big arguments. But talk about how important it is for a Christian to be bold. You don't have to be obnoxious, mm-hmm. but to be bold and confident in telling people about the love of Jesus.
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that anymore. Like I said, I have conservative Christian values, and I'm sure we could have probably an hour-long conversation about that. But I have a small child, and I see the way this world is going. And if we go into a restaurant, into a movie, I will not support transgenderism. I will speak up against it. I will not be cruel. I will not be hateful. But I will stand firm and say, Jesus is very clear on the message, and we will not stand behind that. And I really do think that people out there need to get out their bubble. There's a lot of people that are scared to come out and say, no, this is wrong. We don't meet and negotiate halfway. You stand your ground on what is right and what is wrong. And that's, if you're listening as a Christian, that's what we need to start doing to get this country back in order.
Because the other side's not negotiating.
No, sir.
They're coming out full bore.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the way you said it. We don't need to be cruel or harsh. We need to have compassion, but the other side shows no compassion.
Mm-mm.
And they're not making deals along the way. They are coercing and oppressing wherever they can. So the message of hope needs to come through loud and clear.
You're listening to AFR here, or you're listening to today's issues on AFR. You got Joseph Seidel. He's in studio with us. He's a listener from the state of Kentucky, and he's sharing a little bit about his testimony. One of the things you just mentioned that really has been, I'm very passionate about right now, is you mentioned your family.
Mm-hmm.
And I could talk about my family as well. I really love my family, and I really love my role as the husband, as a Christian dad in my family. You mentioned your son and how that was one more reason that you realized that you had to be more bold in your faith or be more outspoken about your faith. How do you see God's using the family in this country as a means of turning things back around?
So I think sometimes the realization on what's going on, people want to talk about it's going south all the time. You've got to take a disaster and make it into something positive. Right now, I really think that we can, if we have faith and if we pray and we sit there and we think and we close our eyes and we go out there and, like you said, we're just bold and we take that initiative, we come out of our shell and stand our ground is the best way I can answer that question for you.
Amen. Well, the importance of the American family is something my papa, Don Wyman, recognized and realized many, many years ago, and which one of the main reasons that birthed what you're listening to now on AFR, and we support that. We're grateful to have you on the radio program to talk about how much you love your family and how much AFR has impacted your love for your family and love for the people around you.
Joseph, thank you for coming on with us and for being bold and for following Jesus and being a disciple that we, in a way that we need multiplied tens of millions times over
Absolutely.
in this country. But thank you for coming down from Kentucky and being with us and sharing your story.
I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you. That's Joseph Seidel. He's here with his wife, Vicki, and their son, Caleb. And we look forward to be going out to lunch with them and hearing more about their story. And we know that there are stories, Fred, all over the country, people who listen to American Family Radio. And by the way, folks, we're not just saying American Family Radio.
Sure.
There are lots of ministries out there doing the work of Jesus and churches who are not compromising, who are standing up for the truth. And let me just tell you, the days of, we do help other ministries here through American Family Radio. The days of protecting your own little kingdom and saying, no, we're not going to help anybody else out, those days are gone. They've evaporated in the fiery trials that are engulfing our nation. And we need the full expression of the body of Christ in our culture to, if possible, if God will smile upon our efforts, perhaps turn this country back around.
Well, a ministry, to speak to what you've addressed there, a ministry that most of our listeners are familiar with, 8 Days of Hope,
right,
was birthed on this campus.
Amen.
Many, many years ago. And and Steve Tiber, who heads that ministry, will tell you he never dreamed of what God was going to do with that first donation that came from your grandfather.
Yeah.
And got it started, and look what it is doing today.
Yes.
It has gone beyond helping communities in disasters caused by bad weather. Now we're involved with rescuing kids who are being trafficked. It's just, none of us dreamed that this was going to happen, but this is where God takes a willing heart.
Amen.
And your mention of churches out there. Churches are doing the same. There are many churches, good churches out there that are doing the same thing, making people aware of what's going on out there and getting families ready to do the task of taking on the evil that's out there, knowing all the time God is in control and that Jesus is going to set up his throne someday. But in the meantime, we have to be busy about being that salt and light wherever God has put you. And whether it's managing a jail or whether it's being in a police car or whether it's teaching in a classroom or being on the radio, that's where God has you. And I think it's an honor for all of us right now. God has chosen us to be alive at this point in the history of mankind.
Amen.
And what a privilege we have to be here, to be that ring the alarm, but point people to a solution.
Yep.
It's not just about something bad's happening out there. We also say, here's the solution, folks.
Yeah, many times when we get frustrated or things aren't going our way, Satan will tempt us to make God the problem, when I've always said that God's not the problem, he's the solution to the problem.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about leadership, we know that everything rises and falls on leadership. And Mayorkas, he's obviously the leader at the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, and he is not leading very well, which has led to his potential. Well, it failed by a couple votes. He was potentially going to be impeached, but
there's another vote tomorrow. But Wesley and Ed, he has told congressional hearings under oath that the border is secure.
Good to go.
Under oath. Even though we were seeing we were seeing all these people coming in, like close to 6 million now, but he was telling us it was secure. But it's election year, and they've had to change the narrative.
Right.
And now President Biden, Alejandro Mayorkas, who is the Homeland Secretary, they're now saying there is a problem, but it's not our fault.
Right.
It's the fault of those Republicans in Congress. They just will correct the problem. And he repeated that this weekend. Cut number 10.
It certainly is a crisis, and we don't bear responsibility for a broken system, and we're doing a tremendous amount within that broken system. But fundamentally, Congress is the only one who can fix it. There is no question that we have a challenge, a crisis at the border, and there is no question that Congress needs to fix it, and we're doing everything we can within that broken system.
Well, he was either lying over the last 3 years when he said, no problem,
everything's
no
good.
problem, and now he's saying there's a crisis.
No, listen, I'm like millions of other Americans, and I'm just going to say on both sides, that are tired of the lies, because this man is lying through his teeth. They said for 3 years, he said, Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, he said, no, the border's fine. Everything's fine. It's secure, no problems. Well, what happened was conservative governors started sending thousands of these illegal immigrants to the sanctuary cities of blue states, and they began to feel the overwhelming needs that presented on their communities. They started complaining to the Biden administration. Everyone else started complaining about this problem to the Biden administration. Election year rolls around. Joe Biden says a couple of weeks ago, he says it's broken. Now Mayorkas is saying it's broken. But hey, it's not our fault. It's Congress's fault. Or the old bugaboo, it's Donald Trump's fault. Everything is Trump's fault. Even though he was the one person demanding that border be made secure, they're saying it's his fault. Wesley, it's part of this problem is that the government, Congress, loses legitimacy in the eyes of the people. The White House, this current administration, loses legitimacy in the eyes of the American people when they hear these back and forth lies. You can't get a straight answer out of anyone.
No, you can't. And there's so many layers here to why he would say that. Obviously, we've mentioned on the program before, we believe in the Constitution, and the Constitution gives the president authority to shut down the border if there is a crisis. They don't need the Republicans or Democrats. They don't need from a national security standpoint, which is where we're at with the border. By the way, the numbers are upwards. Ted Cruz and his crew, and they're saying upwards to between 8 and 10 million now.
Right.
So they don't need help. The president of the United States doesn't need help, nor does Mayorkas. And Mayorkas should be counseling Biden. Biden should also agree. You would think the president of the United States would have an issue with people coming across the border at this rate as a problem. Nonetheless, they should be working together on fixing the problem, not waiting around. However, I say that to say one of the reasons why they're blaming the Republicans is because they wanted to, it didn't pass. They were wanting to pass the bill, the border bill, which it says border bill, but 2/3 of it was funding other wars across the world.
Right.
And they wanted that money. Yeah, that's the reason. That's the main reason Mayorkas and President Biden wants to put the blame back on the Republicans so that they can get funding. That's an easy line to trace.
Yes.
But to your point, coming back full circle to Mayorkas and his ability to just lie right through his teeth.
Yeah.
Where I was laughing as that was going on at this, I think there's times in history that lying works for the opponent, and you go, man, that's not fair. They're lying, but it works. Right. I don't think this one's going to work.
Right.
I think it's too big of a problem, and you're getting slip ups. I say slip ups, or maybe they just believe it. But you're getting Democrats in these sanctuary cities and these border states. You got even local mayors and local elected officials that are Democrats that are now also saying, now they don't necessarily agree with the solution, but they're agreeing with us that this is a problem.
Right.
And so that there's just no way around this is a major disaster, self-imposed by President Biden when he took all of the executive orders that helped, not perfectly fixed, but helped this problem. And when he wrote them off or undid them, then that's a major problem.
And plus he invited this surge.
Yep.
And as your dad says, as Tim Wildman frequently says, this looks like a problem at the border unless you're wanting millions of people to come in.
That's right.
To become part of the permanent Democratic Party voting bloc.
Yep.
And that's what it looks like. The Biden administration initially set out to do was to welcome millions of new voters who would vote Democrat.
I think that's one option, and I think equally too. They want to break the economic and the healthcare system too as well. Because if you can break it, then you can fix it with more money, right?
Yes, that's right. All right, Fred, we're just about out of time. You got anything short you can toss in, or?
Well, some good news out of the Middle East. The Israeli forces that are in Gaza were able to rescue 2 more hostages this morning. Israel has pushed down into southern Gaza. The bad side of all of this is that the support that was so strong initially after that October 7th massacre, the support from Washington was very strong. It is waning, and was very, very troubled by something that President Biden said late last week, that he described Israel's efforts as being over the top. And I get very concerned because the history has shown countries who turn their back on Israel do not do well.
Right.
And you can go back to Genesis chapter 12 on that
right.
and what God's word says. So be praying. Israel has almost the world against it.
Yeah, I think the Dutch have said they're not going to sell spare parts for the F-35s. Is that right?
The Dutch court ruled that this morning, too. So be praying for Israel. Pray for the resolve. Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be resolved that Hamas must be destroyed, or else they'll just reform and we'll go through all of this again.
All right. All right, thank you, Fred.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, we are going to take a 5-minute break for news. You're listening to Today's Issues on American Family Radio. After the 5-minute break for news, Steve Paisley Jordahl will be in to help us discuss more of what's happening both here and abroad. Continue to pray for our country. Our country is sick, basically from head to toe. We need a great awakening. All right, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Please join us.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association, a ministry with a mission to inform, equip, and activate people like you to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and to give aid to the church here and abroad in her task of fulfilling the Great Commission. We couldn't do it without your day-to-day support. American Family Association. Find us online at afa.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. A familiar face on the president's national security team is getting an expanded role with the administration. Fox's Jared Halpern has more from the White House.
White House National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications John Kirby is taking on a larger role with the administration. The Associated Press says Kirby will be named National Security Communications Advisor and become an assistant to the president. The new role will include coordinating information across agencies. Since 2022, Kirby has been a top spokesperson for national security and foreign affairs issues and regularly joins Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at daily briefings. Kirby is a retired Navy admiral who served as spokesman for the Pentagon and State Department during the Obama administration. At the White House, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was hospitalized again yesterday to address a bladder issue as he continues to recover from prostate cancer. Austin has temporarily turned over authorities to his deputy. The Defense Secretary was diagnosed with prostate cancer in December and continues to deal with complications from his treatment. An American-born Israeli author and national security expert says the Biden administration is going out of its way to keep Israel from defeating Hamas. Chad Groening has more.
Caroline Glick is a journalist and a former advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, who serves as a senior contributing editor at the Jewish News Syndicate. In a recent column, she warned how the Biden administration is continuing to hamper the ability of Israeli defense forces to achieve victory in Gaza. During an appearance on Washington Watch on American Family Radio, she said one problem is the Biden administration's failure related to the distribution of humanitarian aid.
We now know that 60 to 70% of all of the food and medicines and fuel coming into Gaza at the U.S.'s demand go directly to Hamas. So it's not actually going to the people of Gaza. And the only way to make sure that they would get the relief that they require is for them to leave Gaza, just as Ukrainians leave Ukraine and Syrians left Syria, and everybody leaves war zones in order to seek refuge. So the Biden administration is barring the Palestinians from leaving Gaza to seek refuge. And as a result, they're forcing them to remain beholden to Hamas and blocking Israel from being able to win the war.
And Glick says many countries are willing to provide refuge for the hostages.
There are at least 10 countries have already expressed willingness to accept the Palestinians who want to leave Gaza. And the United States is saying absolutely not, under no circumstances, and then blaming Israel for the plight of these people and demanding that we resupply Gaza, even though they know full well in the administration that that requires Israel to resupply Hamas, prolonging the war, prolonging the captivity of our hostages that are being held by Hamas.
Glick says Israel's in a very dangerous moment right now. I'm Chad Groening.
Attacks on New York City police officers are increasing, and the trend does not look like it's going to slow down. Fox's CB Cotton has more from Times Square.
Police and body camera video show officers are being assaulted on a variety of calls. City data shows more and more officers are getting injured each year. There was a 20% increase in officer injuries from 2021 to 2022. And data for the first 3 quarters of 2023 show it'll be record-setting. Just last week, a close call for one officer after the NYPD says a migrant teen who was shoplifting fired at a retail security guard and the police who were trying to stop him. These alleged crimes come as the city expands the number of migrant shelters under curfew beginning today.
Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg says he will not tolerate attacks on officers. In final news, voters in New York's 3rd Congressional District on Long Island will go to the polls tomorrow in a special election to select a replacement for George Santos. Democrats who were eager to flip the seat selected Tom Zuzi, a former congressman from the area with decades of political experience. He's running against Maisie Melissa Phillip, a little-known Republican who is new to the national scene. Santos was expelled from Congress last year after an ethics report on his conduct. And that's all our time for now. Find more news on afn.net. Thank you for listening.
Forget about Facebook.
The last 10 days we've been banned twice, and is unbanning a word?
They put us under the ban. Christians and conservatives
don't need you, YouTube.
Banned one day, banned again.
AFR programs are now live streaming on the AFA streaming app. Now you can get shows like today's issues straight from the source.
Put back on the next.
Just say unbanned.
Unbanned.
Just search AFA streaming or visit streaming.afa.net to sign up.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back to Today's Issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman today. Wesley Wildman joins me in studio, and now in studio is Steve Jordahl. Good morning / good afternoon, Steve.
Good morning / good afternoon, Ed and Walker.
Now, we did start off talking about the Super Bowl at the top of the show.
Yeah.
You're a huge NFL fan.
I do. I like the NFL.
But you're a Las Vegas Raiders fan.
I'm a Raiders fan, yes. Grew up a Raiders fan, grew up in the Bay Area. So I got attachments to the 49ers as well. That was never really, and people want to say there's a rivalry between the Raiders and the 49ers. Really never was. They don't play in the same division or same league. So,
same conference or division.
Yeah.
So like the Rams, for example, a lifelong Rams fan.
Oh, Rams and 49ers.
49ers were in the Western Division of the NFC forever.
Yeah. And the Raiders and Chiefs are
same thing.
Rivals.
Yeah. So who did you root for?
I was kind of rooting for the 49ers.
Okay.
I like the Brock Purdy story. But to be honest, since the Raiders were in it, I really didn't have a whole lot of emotion going towards it. I marvel every time I see Patrick Mahomes play. I mean, the guy's just incredible.
He's
so you gotta love watching that.
Yeah.
But I was kind of hoping, and except for if they could have gotten converted a fourth down or a third down toward the very end of the game, the last drive, the 49ers had it, they would have salted the game away.
Yep.
There was 2 minutes left. They had there's only 1 or 2 timeouts left. They could have almost knelt it down
to get that close.
That close.
Yeah. Well, I was just curious as to who you were going to root.
Yeah, you don't.
Root for.
Both quarterbacks, to my knowledge, are born again believers, and they're very clear on their presentation of how they got saved and what Jesus means to them in life and how He influences their decision making.
So it was a coin flip. God.
That's
rooted for both.
So kudos to both of those guys for being, because there's a lot of pressure in that high of a profile to keep that quiet.
Yeah.
And so kudos to them. I will say though, just a step further, I was the other direction. I was pulling for Brock Purdy. Purdy. I like to say Purdy.
Yes, that's right.
No, because most people that follow NFL know this, but those who don't, he was the very last pick in the NFL draft. The very last pick overall.
In fact, he was called. His nickname was Mr. Irrelevant.
That's
it.
That's the traditional nickname for everybody.
Oh, is it?
Drafted the last. That's the last draft is always called Mr. Irrelevant.
Oh, okay.
Prior to this, the only really Mr. Irrelevant that had made a mark in the NFL was a kicker, and I can't even remember who it was, but someone played for several seasons, maybe still be playing, I don't know, but was a successful kicker. But this has blown all Mr. Irrelevant stories out of the water.
I listened to an interview by Purdy the other day, and Brock, the quarterback for the 49ers, and he said, look, I like football. I love playing. I'm paraphrasing here. I love playing football, and as long as I can play it, I'm going to play it. But this doesn't identify who I am. I'm a born-again believer. I'm a Christian. And if I'm not playing football, wherever God has me, that's where I want to make the most use of that moment where I'm at.
I have a story about that later on.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
Little kind of.
All right, well, then let's go ahead and get started with the stories you want to bring to our attention, Steve.
All right. Well, they have, according to several news outlets, local news and the Post-Millennial, is talking about this. They have identified the shooter at Lakewood Church in Texas, at Joel Osteen's church. You remember they said they reported a lady came in with a child, a 4-year-old child in tow. and started shooting and was taken down by security, much like, by the way, this eerily mirrors what was happening in Colorado Springs a dozen years or so ago, the church shooting there, where a church security person, off-duty police officer, took that shooter down too. But they've identified the person that they say that did the shooting. The name is Janice Yvonne Moreno. But Janice has another name. Janice also goes by, or used to go by, Jeffrey Escalante Moreno.
So
you might not be hearing a lot about this in the mainstream media.
Yes. So this was a man.
It was a man who was
a
identified
trans woman, and what that means is
a man.
It's a man who believes he's a woman.
Right.
So this in the last hour when we were talking about this briefly with Fred Jackson, I made mention of the fact that I have never heard of a woman. Now, maybe I'm sure there has been. I just don't remember of a woman who is a
mass shooter.
Mass shooter. It always seems to be men. And in Nashville, that was also a quote unquote trans woman. It was a man, young man, who believed he was a woman. So this, if this turns out, as you're saying, this is being reported now, if it turns out to be the case, this is kind of what we have been seeing. Angry young men for some reason.
The other piece of information that they're coming forward with is that on the actual rifle, I think probably assault rifle, that so-called assault rifle that this shooter was using, this guy was using, he had a sticker on it that said "Free Palestine."
Okay.
So I don't know where Joel Osteen's church comes down on the Palestine. I'm assuming that he's
probably pro-Israel.
Pro-Israel. And I don't know that this doesn't speak to the motive. I would tend to think that transgender or sexual theology at that church is maybe a little looser than churches we're comfortable with, but I don't know for sure.
Well, I know that in the past, Joel Osteen, when asked about homosexuality, this was before the transgender movement really hit its stride,
right,
so to speak, in a bad way. But when asked about homosexuality, all Joel Osteen would say is, well, I don't believe that's God's best, but I am here to preach a positive, message, and so I don't. I'm not called to talk about sin.
Yeah,
I want to take us back just for a moment to remind us that we're going to have, as AFR and AFA will follow up and keep you abreast on this shooting, because just as you gave the information about this man being a transgender woman, you're not going to hear that. Most likely won't hear that on a lot of the mainstream media outlets. So taking us back, remember the Nashville shooting, the Covenant school shooting.
Yep.
They also withheld that manifesto for 8 months.
They're still withholding most of it. It was leaked.
It was leaked. They're still withholding it. And the manifesto was very clear in there that they were targeting Christians, the transgender, along with other prep kids and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have to follow this closely because that kind of stuff matters. Especially, I'm not there. I don't believe in a hate crime like there being an asterisk
right
to murder. However, it does matter if you're going to give the other side when it's a racist. If you're going to be consistent here and you're going to give the manifesto when it fits your political narrative,
right?
Then we're going to hold you accountable to that same standard. If there's a manifesto here that says it's targeting Christians,
right?
Because it's at a church. If she has that or he has that,
it's confusing.
Then we're going to cover that on AFR.
Yeah. Well said, because that is exactly what happens when the narrative is on the other side,
yes,
and promotes their agenda.
Yeah.
They will talk about the motives all day long.
That's it. That's the point.
Otherwise, it's hush-hush.
Yeah, you said there's not many, you haven't heard of another female shooter. According to the internet, which is never wrong.
Right.
Women participated only 2% of mass shootings, but the very first headline under that is Audrey Hale takes infamous spot as 7th female mass shooter. She wasn't a Audrey was the dude that shot up the Covenant in Nashville. So that's back to 6.
Yes. Okay.
That's right.
That's right. All right. Well, that is good information. Keep us and our listeners updated. I know American Family News will do that. Keep as more information comes out. I do want to find out, and we don't know yet, who the child was that this man dragged. This child is in critical condition, right? Because caught in the gunfire.
That's the news, yes.
And so what a terrible tragedy that is as well. We'll try to find out as news comes out who this little boy is. A little boy, right? This little boy was in relation to this man.
And we probably should know more about the motive, too. Hopefully we find out. Somebody, whether it was the Palestinian thing, whether it was the transgender thing, something unrelated to either one of those. It could have been any or all of the above. So.
Okay.
All right. The fallout continues to the special counsel's report on Joe Biden. And as you may remember, I don't know if we talked about this or not before, but the special counsel, this was the investigation into Joe Biden and how he handled the documents, the documents that he took from the White House that were classified. Now, Donald Trump, they've accused him of having the same kind of thing. They're throwing the book at him.
Right.
But this special counsel, there's not enough evidence to support any kind of charge. No reasonable prosecutor would charge Joe Biden for what he did. And, by the way, the reason we wouldn't charge him is because he's an old man with poor memory.
Yeah, this is outrageous.
And let me tell you, to watch the Democrats go into apoplexy trying to defend Joe Biden after this, how irresponsible it is for anybody that just doesn't belong in that report. You know, the report says he's innocent. That's all that you need to say. Well, conservatives and observers, honest observers, have been noticing this since he was elected. I mean, how often do we play things that Joe Biden says or tries to say that just are incomprehensible or nonsensical or just plain wrong? Well, Joe Biden himself was asked about this in 2018. This was during the middle of the Trump administration. 2018 would have been when the Democrats were trying to line up who was going to run against Donald Trump in 2020. It ended up being Joe Biden, but at this point, you're going to hear he hadn't declared yet, but they were asking him about it. And the interviewer starts by saying, is age something that you should consider? Is it right for the public to consider whether being too old? And yes, he said it is. So I'm going to play you that, and then you're going to hear a little bit of how he's declined of late. So let's listen to clip 2.
Is age a legitimate issue?
It is a legitimate issue. Sure it is. And I think people are going to judge it. If I were to run, I think they're going to judge me on my vitality. Can I still run up the steps of Air Force Two? Am I still in good shape? Do I have all my faculties? Am I energetic? I think it's totally legitimate for people to ask those questions. He said, "It's not. We lead with the Department of from Charlotte, another line going from in Florida down to Tampa. The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway."
That's not even the same person.
That's pretty shocking that's 6 years, Wesley.
It is.
And he sounded pretty decent in 2018.
He did. The music in the background, though,
that was put together by the RNC.
Yeah. That was put together.
That does slant things a little
just
bit.
a little bit.
However, it does make the points still remains true, and that's that there's a significant there's evidence before and quote after of the difference of how much Joe Biden's physical and mental capacity has slipped, and the reports. Who was it that reported that? The special counsel?
The special counsel. It was in the special counsel's report. They filed a report.
Who makes up the special counsel in this case?
The special counsel was appointed. I have to look up his name, but he was appointed. AQR. He was appointed by the Justice Department, by the Attorney General.
To look into the documents that the president, then former vice president, had that were
classified. And the reason they do that is because, well, it's impartial. It's not a Democrat Republican thing. They say it's just somebody that they find that's impartial. And because they charge the president with the same thing, the obvious comparison is, well, are you going to throw the book at Biden? So they had to find somebody, and somebody they found shockingly said, no, he's nothing to see here except that he's old and he can't think anymore. And so that's what the people are kind of overlooking, the fact that they're not going to charge him in the double standard with Donald Trump. That's kind of second news. The first primary thing they're talking about is that this guy said that he's incompetent.
Yep.
Right.
But you should hear, this is interesting, you should hear the administration and the mainstream media trying to downplay or defend this president. This is Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, and he's asked about the special counsel report. Let me tell you, he thinks that there's no problem here. Cut 4.
Then made gratuitous, unnecessary, and inaccurate personal remarks, and those are improper. The most difficult part about a meeting with President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
Yeah.
Well, gee, was he
Must have
told
caught him
to
on a
say
good day.
that? Yeah. Listen, folks, when we talk about President Biden's age, we do like to stress. I know Tim's always making sure we make this point. We're not making fun of the elderly. I'm on the verge of being elderly. Okay? I'm 65. I get a senior discount without even asking for it. They just assume I need it. Okay? And so, as we've said before, as Tim has said, Brother Don Wildman, who started this ministry, suffered from Lewy body dementia in the last portion of his life. It's very sad. And so we are not mocking President Biden. We are merely pointing out the facts because he's the leader of the free world. And if the situation were reversed, Wesley, let me just say this. If the situation were reversed and President Biden was sharp, energetic, strong, but President Trump was talking like he talks, that's all we would hear from the media and the Democratic Party is the fact that President Trump the former President Trump is not, he should not be president because he's not equipped to run the country.
You're right, and I think personally that they have waited too far in the game. I think this is really, 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 between this issue and what's taking place at the border crisis, both of those are going to be too much. Now, we got 8 months or 10 months, but those two are extremely difficult to overcome because you're not able to talk about, even though we disagree with his platform and all the positions that President Biden, at least I disagree with his efforts to lead. I think he's a bad leader. When you have a clear mind and you're physical and you're strong and you're fit and you're ready to go, and then you're taking care and you're having answers to the border, even though you created the problem,
right?
That's not as hard. This is very difficult. This is going to be very difficult for the Democrats to overcome those two main issues. Yep. President Joe Biden's current state and what's going on at the border. What do we got? 8 months to go. 9 months before the election.
Right.
They've created that's going to be the issue. And it's going to distract from anything that they want to accomplish. I mean, it's taking up the airwaves.
Let me throw another wild card in there.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay. I know who this. I know the initials.
This was a commercial that aired on the Super Bowl yesterday. Let's listen to cut 11.
Kennedy, 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 Kennedy.
So, if any of you who are of the golden age, maybe like 60 or 70 or above,
like
might
my
remember
age.
that.
Yeah.
Might remember that was an actual commercial from John F. Kennedy's 1960 presidential campaign, but it was replaced. The pictures of Kennedy were replaced with pictures of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He is running. So, if you have a compromised Biden, terrible in the polls, and now Robert F. Kennedy decides to throw his hat in as a third-party candidate, Now, there were a lot of Republicans that were speaking kind of fondly of Robert Kennedy as opposed to Donald Trump, who certainly doesn't have the rhetorical baggage. He has some other – it kind of appeals to the more like the people who are cautious about the vaccines and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But who does he take more voters from,
That's
Biden or Trump?
That's a good
'Cause he's
question.
running.
I'm not sure anybody. I'm not sure anybody knows the answer to that question. But he is, your words, perfect description. He is an absolute wild card. There are a number of other third-party candidates who are going to be running. Cornel West, the Harvard professor. I forget the party he's running, but he's just, I think, an out-and-out socialist. Jill Stein, I think, maybe for the Green Party. But anyway. So we're going to see more third-party candidates than we probably have ever seen, and RFK Jr. has the ability to really rock the boat. Although he actually apologized for the ad.
This was not. He did not put this ad out. It was put out by a PAC, a political action committee that wants him to be president. They did this without his permission.
Yeah.
I will say, though, all the polls that I've been seeing now thinking about it right now on live radio,
yes,
they don't include, to my knowledge, the third-party candidate as an option.
Right.
They're just comparing either President Joe Biden to Nikki Haley or President Joe Biden to Donald Trump,
right,
and what that would look like and the margin of victory. The Real Clear Politics, they average up all the polls to the way I understand it, and they give you a number, but they don't include a third party.
Yeah, and
that's
a place
a good
like
question.
California or New York, RFK Jr. is probably not going to make much difference to the final outcome.
That's right.
Because those are solidly blue, and they're pretty much going to go for whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Sure.
If it's Biden or somebody else, it doesn't really matter. But in swing states,
it can make a big difference.
A big difference could be made by one or more third-party candidates.
Yeah.
So there actually have been some polls that take
there is,
into
okay.
consideration. Yeah. So this is from a Real Clear Politics, and the polls that they mentioned, there's one that's a TIPP poll that has the general election. If it was Trump versus Biden versus Kennedy versus Manchin versus West versus Stein versus Mapstead. So this is everybody, and that has Trump at 40%, Biden at 34%, Kennedy down at 8%. If it's that's a general election, that's a national poll. In Massachusetts, Trump versus Biden versus Kennedy versus Cornel West, Biden is at 45 points, Trump is at 26, and Kennedy's only at 9 in Massachusetts.
Yeah, but Kennedy is not. He's persona non grata to actual Democrats because the party as a whole has shifted so far
That's
left.
Right.
RFK Jr. is more like a traditional Democrat, a traditional liberal. He's against cancel culture, those kinds of things, kind of like a Bill Maher, that doesn't like cancel. So, in fact, the Kennedy family was angry about the ad, the RFK Jr. ad that ran on the Super Bowl. So I'm not surprised. Massachusetts is so far left. I don't mention them when we talk, like I just said, about California and New York. But Illinois, Massachusetts is going to be right there with some of the absolutely most liberal states in the country.
How would you know about that, Ed?
Yes, because I was born and lived for a while in the Boston area. My dad, who is very conservative, moved us across the state line. I grew up in Nashua, New Hampshire. And growing up, we didn't like people from Massachusetts who had a huge tax burden moving into New Hampshire that has no income tax.
I mean, after you moved.
After we moved up there. And now all those people going up there have turned New Hampshire purple at the very least. So we didn't like the people from Massachusetts, even though they were my kinfolk.
That's right.
So. All right, folks, that is all we have. There's tons of news we didn't get to. We just try to discuss a handful of subjects and give you a Christian perspective on them. But, hey, guess what? There'll be more news tomorrow, and we invite you to join us again. More great programming directly ahead. Tim Wildman should be back with us tomorrow. And, folks, you have a wonderful day. God bless you. Continue to pray for our nation.
Spiritual Heritage Tours with AFA President